When you stop chasing, something powerful begins to happen, something that often goes unnoticed until the silence settles in. People assume that words hold the greatest weight, but it is absence that leaves the deepest mark. When you withdraw your energy, when you no longer flood someone with attention, you create a void. And that void does not stay empty. It pulls at the mind, it makes the other person think, it forces them to reflect on why the attention has disappeared. Attention is like currency, and the moment you stop handing it out freely, it becomes rare, it becomes valuable. The human mind cannot help but notice the difference between what was once abundant and what is suddenly scarce. This is the power of absence. It is not about punishment, nor is it about playing games. It is about understanding that value is created when something is no longer constantly available. Just like silence makes sound more meaningful, absence makes presence more powerful. When you stop chasing, you send an unspoken message that your life is not dependent on anyone else's validation, that you are capable of standing tall without needing constant reciprocation. That message is not delivered in words, it is delivered in energy, in restraint, in the courage to walk away from the endless pursuit. She notices it even if she doesn't admit it. The mind is wired to pay attention to change, and when the flow of attention suddenly stops, it does not go unnoticed. It becomes a question mark in her thoughts. It creates curiosity. What caused the silence? Why is the attention gone? Was it something she overlooked, or has something shifted within you? In the absence of your chasing, her thoughts begin to spiral inward, not outward. She is no longer evaluating what you are doing to reach her, but instead wondering why you are no longer doing it. Absence works because it breaks patterns. When someone becomes used to being pursued, they subconsciously begin to devalue it. They assume it will always be there, like air, constant and unquestioned. But when that pattern ends, the air feels thinner. Suddenly, what was once taken for granted demands attention. Your silence, your restraint becomes louder than any words could ever be. It reminds her that nothing in this world should ever be assumed as permanent unless it is nurtured and respected. The power of not chasing lies in what it reflects about you. It shows that your worth is not tied to constant approval. It shows that your energy is not an endless resource to be drained without appreciation. And most importantly, it shows that you respect yourself enough to step back when something is not balanced. That respect, though unspoken, is deeply felt. Because the moment you stop running towards someone is the same moment they are forced to stop and ask themselves why they were being run toward in the first place. Absence creates space. And in that space, realization begins to grow. Realization of your value, of your presence, of the impact your energy truly had. That is the quiet power of not chasing. While it feels like nothing on the surface, it is everything beneath it. It is the shift that makes the other person see what they could not see when everything was being handed to them too easily. It is the reminder that your attention was never a given. It was always a gift. When you constantly pursue someone, you unintentionally lower your own value in their eyes. It's not because you are any less worthy or less powerful, but because human nature tends to undervalue what is always available. When something's easily accessible, the mind assumes it will always be there, and the appreciation for it diminishes. This is why the moment you stop chasing, the shift begins. The energy changes, the dynamic changes, and the perception of your worth is elevated. By no longer pouring every ounce of yourself into the pursuit, you remind her that you are not a resource to be drained, but a person of depth, substance, and self-respect. The act of stepping back communicates what words often fail to convey, that you recognize your own value and that your attention is not something to be taken lightly. This shift in value doesn't come from arrogance, nor does it come from neglect. It comes from the strength to respect yourself enough to stop overextending. When you stop chasing, you stop giving away the power of your presence so freely. Suddenly, she realizes that your attention is not guaranteed. Suddenly, she notices the silence where there used to be constant noise. And that silence forces her to reflect. She may not have noticed the effort you were giving before, but she notices the absence of it now. The shift is subtle, but undeniable. Your worth, once overlooked, is now magnified because scarcity amplifies value. Every action you take, whether to chase or to step back, communicates a message. When you chase endlessly, the message you send is that her approval is more important than your own self-worth. But when you stop, when you step back with calmness and certainty, you send an entirely different message, that you are complete without constant validation, that your happiness and purpose extend far beyond anyone else's recognition. This is not just powerful, it is magnetic, because people are naturally drawn to those who carry themselves with confidence and self-assurance. The moment you stop chasing is the moment she begins to realize that your attention was never hers to demand, it was always yours to give. Think about how powerful this is. By doing less, by chasing less, you actually create more impact. This is the paradox of value. What is scarce is treasured. What is abundant is overlooked. When you stop giving your energy in endless pursuit, you teach her without words that your attention is rare and meaningful. And the human mind, by design, cannot ignore rarity. She begins to see you differently. The things she once dismissed become the things she now considers deeply. The moments she once thought were ordinary now feel extraordinary because they are no longer guaranteed. This shift also places you in a position of strength. When you are no longer chasing, you are no longer controlled by her reaction, her approval, or her recognition. You are operating from a place of independence rather than dependence. This makes your presence more powerful and your absence more noticeable. It flips the dynamic completely. Instead of wondering how to respond to your pursuit, she begins to wonder why it has stopped. Instead of assuming you will always be there, she begins to question what she must do to earn your presence again. The chase does not disappear, it simply changes direction. At its core, the shift of value is about respect for yourself and the respect it inspires in others. When you respect yourself enough to stop giving away your energy without balance, you invite others to respect you in the same way. She may not admit it immediately, but deep down she begins to feel the difference. She begins to recognize that the attention she once overlooked was a privilege, not a guarantee. And in that recognition, her perception of you is transformed. No longer is she looking at someone desperate for approval. She is now seeing someone who knows their worth, someone who is willing to walk away from what does not honor it. That shift is powerful, and it all begins the moment you stop chasing. When you stop chasing, something remarkable happens. You hold up a mirror without even realizing it. Your absence becomes a reflection, a quiet but powerful signal that forces her to look inward, while constant pursuit allows her to focus outward. Always analyzing what you are doing to prove yourself. The moment that energy disappears, she is no longer able to avoid her own role in the dynamic. She starts asking questions she never had to ask before. Was she giving enough? Did she truly value the attention she was receiving? Did she ever meet the effort that was being offered so consistently? This mirror effect doesn't come from confrontation or accusations. It comes from silence. And silence has a way of speaking directly to the mind in a way words never could. The mirror effect is uncomfortable, and that's exactly why it is powerful. When someone is always pursued, they never have to evaluate their own contribution because they are always in a position of receiving. But when the chase ends, they are forced to face themselves. They are forced to reflect on whether they have given back, whether they have honored the energy that was once so freely flowing toward them. And in that moment, her thoughts shift from entitlement to accountability. She begins to realize that attention is not an endless resource, that it must be reciprocated, nurtured, and appreciated. Without the mirror effect, she might never have paused long enough to consider this truth. This reflection isn't about guilt, it's about clarity. It reveals truths that were hidden beneath the surface of constant pursuit. She may have convinced herself that your efforts were simply who you are, that they would always continue no matter what she did or didn't do. But when that effort is removed, the clarity sets in. Attention only flows when it is earned, when it is respected, when it is valued. The mirror forces her to see not only what she received, but also what she failed to return. This is the subtle power of restraint. It turns the focus back on her, not through anger or force, but through the undeniable truth of absence. There is also a deeper psychological shift that happens when you stop chasing. Human beings are wired to seek balance. When one person is over giving and the other is under giving, the imbalance goes unnoticed as long as the flow continues. But the moment the giving stops, the imbalance becomes obvious. She begins to feel the weight of her own lack of effort. She begins to notice the silence where her voice should have been, the absence where her presence could have filled the gap. The imbalance is now in her hands, and the mirror demands she either ignore it or act upon it. Most often, ignoring it becomes impossible because the human mind cannot escape the discomfort of imbalance. The mirror effect also works because it shifts the burden of thought. When you chase, she doesn't have to think much about her role. She can simply respond or not respond, accept or ignore with little consequence. But when you stop, she has to do the thinking. She has to analyze, she has to wonder, she has to reflect. What once was your effort to prove yourself now becomes her effort to understand what happened. The energy of thought is no longer on your side, it is on hers. That shift alone changes everything because thought leads to awareness and awareness leads to change. And the most powerful part of the mirror effect is that it cannot be avoided. She can dismiss your words. She can argue with your reasoning. She can even deny your perspective if you try to explain it. But she cannot ignore the silence. She cannot ignore the sudden absence of energy that was once hers to receive. The mirror does not speak. It does not argue. It simply reflects. And in that reflection, she sees the truth, both about you and about herself. This is the moment she realizes that the chase was never about desperation. It was about devotion, and devotion without appreciation cannot survive. Curiosity is one of the most powerful forces in the human mind, and it awakens the moment something that was once predictable suddenly changes. When you stop chasing, you create that change. And with it, you create curiosity. She begins to wonder why the pattern has shifted, why the energy she was accustomed to receiving is no longer there. The brain naturally craves answers to disruptions, and silence is one of the biggest disruptions of all. Where there was once pursuit, now there is stillness. Where there was once constant affirmation, now there is quiet. That quiet doesn't make her forget you. It makes her think of you more. It raises questions that demand answers, and those questions become the seeds of curiosity. At first, curiosity might feel subtle, almost like a passing thought, but over time it grows louder. She starts to notice that the texts aren't coming as often, the calls aren't being made, the effort is no longer overflowing. And with every moment of that realization, her thoughts are pulled deeper into curiosity. What changed? Did I do something wrong? Has his focus shifted elsewhere? Why isn't he chasing anymore? These are not questions you need to ask. These are questions her mind creates on its own, because the absence of your effort leaves space for her imagination to fill. And imagination, once engaged, is relentless. This curiosity also flips the balance of attention. For so long, your chasing made her the center of your focus. She didn't need to wonder where your energy was directed. It was obvious. But now, when you stop, the roles reverse. She begins to think about where your attention has gone. Has it shifted inward toward your growth, your goals, your life? Has it shifted outward toward other opportunities, other connections? The uncertainty becomes a magnet for her thoughts. Instead of you constantly chasing her, she now begins chasing answers. And the irony is that this shift is not forced by you doing more. It is created by you doing less. Curiosity is powerful because it doesn't just make her think of you, it makes her think differently about you. Before, she may have assumed she had you figured out, that your constant pursuit defined your intentions and your character. But when that pursuit stops, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is attractive because it suggests depth. It suggests strength. It suggests that there is more to you than she initially believed. Suddenly, you are no longer a known quantity. You are a mystery, and mysteries demand attention. The mind cannot resist trying to solve them. What makes curiosity so effective is that it is internally driven. You are not standing there telling her to think of you. You are not demanding her attention. You are not begging for recognition. Instead, her own mind does the work. The curiosity comes from within her. And because it is her own thought process, it carries more weight than anything you could have said. She is no longer responding to your chase. She is responding to the questions rising within her. And that difference is crucial because what comes from within is always stronger than what comes from outside. Over time, this curiosity starts to shift into desire. Curiosity asks questions and desire seeks answers. She will begin to wonder not just why you stopped chasing, but what she can do to bring that energy back. She will begin to notice what she may have overlooked before, the value of your attention, the weight of your presence, the strength of your restraint. And as she reflects, the curiosity deepens into realization that your attention was never guaranteed, realization that your effort carried meaning, realization that she now wants what she once dismissed. This is the true awakening that happens when you stop chasing. It is not only curiosity about your absence. It is curiosity about how to earn your presence again. And in this awakening, you no longer need to prove your worth. Your silence has already done it for you. The questions running through her mind are proof that she sees your value, perhaps more clearly now than ever before. Curiosity ensures you are no longer an afterthought, you become a central thought. And that shift is not created by force, it is created by space. The absence of your chase becomes the trigger that makes her realize she must now chase answers of her own. Respect is not something that can be demanded. And it is not something that magically appears because you give endlessly. True respect is earned through restraint, through boundaries, and through the ability to hold your ground even when it would be easier to give in. When you stop chasing, you are not being cold or distant. You are showing that you respect yourself. That act alone changes the way she sees you. Constant pursuit may get you attention, but it rarely gets you respect. What gets respect is the discipline to step back, the strength to show that you will not devalue yourself by overextending. Respect is born when someone recognizes that you value yourself enough to walk away from anything that doesn't match your energy, and that kind of respect cannot be ignored. Even if she never admits it out loud, when you chase endlessly, you might win moments of acknowledgement, but you lose the deeper recognition of your worth. It is the difference between being noticed and being respected. Attention can be cheap. It can be given without thought, without depth. But respect is costly. It requires sacrifice. It requires restraint. It requires the courage to choose silence over desperation. When you stop chasing, you show that you are not willing to give your energy away without return. And that choice plants the seed of respect in her mind. She begins to see you as someone who carries dignity, someone who is not moved by impulse alone, but by principle. That quiet strength commands more respect than any words or constant effort ever could. Respect grows because self-respect is contagious. People treat you in alignment with how you treat yourself. If you show that you are willing to give endlessly with no boundaries, people will take endlessly with no thought. But if you show that you value yourself, that you hold your energy as something meaningful, others have no choice but to follow that lead. When she sees that you are not willing to chase, when she realizes that your presence cannot be commanded, she begins to see you differently. She begins to measure her actions against your standard. She begins to understand that your respect for yourself demands respect from her as well. This is the unspoken law of relationships. Others learn how to treat you by watching how you treat yourself. The respect factor is also powerful because it creates a shift in perception. When you were chasing, she may have believed she held the higher ground, that she was the prize to be pursued while you were the one doing the proving. But when you stop, that perception collapses. Suddenly, she sees that you are not beneath her, you are not dependent on her, you are not desperate for her recognition. You are standing equal, perhaps even higher. Because you have the strength to step back, that realization forces her to reframe how she sees you, not as someone who will always be there, no matter what, but as someone whose value demands acknowledgement, and acknowledgement is the foundation of respect. There is also an element of admiration that grows out of respect. It is not easy to stop chasing, especially when emotions are involved. It takes discipline, self-control, and clarity of mind, and those qualities are rare. Most people give in to the impulse to chase, to beg, to cling. When she sees that you are different, when she sees that you have the strength to hold your ground, she cannot help but admire that quality. Even if she disagrees with your choice, even if she resists at first, deep down respect takes root. Because respect is not about liking every action, it is about recognizing the strength behind those actions. Ultimately, the respect factor comes down to alignment. When you stop chasing, you are aligning with your words, with your principles. You are showing that you will not compromise who you are just to keep someone in your life. And that alignment is what earns lasting respect. She begins to think differently, not about what you can do to keep her, but about what she must do to deserve you. That is the shift that changes everything. Respect transforms the dynamic from one-sided effort to balanced recognition. And that transformation begins the moment you show enough respect for yourself to stop chasing. Influence is often mistaken for loudness, for constant effort, for the visible display of energy. But in truth, the deepest form of influence is silent. It is what lingers in the mind when no words are spoken, what shapes perception without needing explanation. When you stop chasing, you tap into that silent influence. You no longer try to convince her of your worth with constant action. Instead, your restraint speaks on your behalf. The absence of pursuit becomes the presence of power. It changes the way she thinks about you, not because you demanded it, but because silence demands thought. That thought becomes influence. And that influence carries more weight than any repeated attempts to gain attention ever could. The silent influence works because it shifts the burden of realization onto her. When you were chasing, you were doing all the work, trying to show her your value, trying to earn her time, trying to prove your place in her life. But the moment you stop, you hand that responsibility back to her. Now she must decide how much you matter. Now she must measure what your absence means. Now she must reflect on the void your silence has created. That shift is powerful because influence that comes from within her mind lasts longer than influence forced from the outside. She cannot escape the questions, the reflections, the realizations, because they are now hers, not yours. Silent influence also carries weight because it cannot be dismissed. Words can be argued with, actions can be minimized, but absence is undeniable. She may try to ignore it at first. She may pretend it doesn't matter, but deep down, she feels it. The silence is there every time she notices your energy is no longer directed toward her. It is there in the spaces where your presence used to fill the room. It is there in the moments where your attention was once expected. Silence leaves no room for excuses. It simply exists, and it forces acknowledgement. That is why silent influence is so powerful. It bypasses defenses and speaks directly to the truth. This influence is not about manipulation. It is about alignment. By stepping back, you are not playing games. You are not trying to control. You are simply aligning with your own value and letting that alignment do the work. That is why it feels so natural, so effortless, and yet so impactful. You are no longer spending energy to prove something. You are embodying it, and embodiment always has more influence than effort. A person who knows their worth does not need to shout it. They simply live it, and the world adjusts accordingly. That adjustment is what she begins to experience when you stop chasing. The silent influence also creates space for her growth. When you were constantly chasing, she may never have felt the need to rise to meet you. Your energy filled every gap. Your effort carried every moment. Your presence made up for every absence on her part. But now, when you step back, the silence becomes a challenge. It invites her to ask, what can I do to meet his standard? How can I bring back the energy that I now miss? That challenge born from silence can awaken a new level of respect, appreciation, and effort from her. Silent influence doesn't just change how she sees you, it can change how she acts. And perhaps the greatest power of silent influence is clarity. It shows you who truly values you, not by their words, but by their response to your absence. If she respects you, if she values you, if she sees your worth, the silence will draw her closer. If she does not, the silence will expose that too. Either way, silence gives you the truth. It reveals what endless chasing could never reveal, whether she is there for your presence or simply because you made yourself impossible to ignore. Silent influence filters out the noise and leaves only the reality. In the end, the silent influence is not about her at all. It is about you choosing to live aligned with your value. It is about you refusing to beg for recognition, refusing to dilute your worth, refusing to prove what should already be seen. That influence, born from silence, reshapes the way she thinks. But more importantly, it reshapes the way you carry yourself. Because the greatest influence you can have is not in how others see you, but in how clearly you see yourself. And when you stop chasing, when you let silence do the work, you stand in a power that no amount of pursuit could ever create.